Okay, let's just briefly recap a few points on defences. So, stepping back, necessity. You can invoke necessity where there is a grave and imminent peril, and your actions are necessary to safeguard an essential interest. So this sounds a bit like the Caroline formula from self-defense cases, where there's a grave peril uh, that's imminent and that leaves no moment for deliberation and no choice of alternatives. But you cannot take such action if it would seriously impair the essential interest of the state or states towards which the obligation existed, or some essential interest of the international community as a whole. Self-defense is quite confusing to put within state responsibility. There were suggestions that it be deleted because it's not strictly a secondary rule at all. It's a completely self-contained set of primary rules, and placing them in circumstances precluding wrongfulness seems sometimes quite difficult for students to get their heads around. But the essential point is that in response to a breach of the obligation not to commit acts of aggression against another state, the obligation not to subject another state to an armed attack, obviously, if a state resorts to self-defense, that is not a breach of Article 2.4 of the UN Charter and perhaps various other obligations. So it's somewhat illogical to have it within the articles on state responsibility, as it's really an exceptional category, a set of primary rules on its own. And finally, as I said, we will in a later session deal with countermeasures. Countermeasures being action you're entitled to take in response to the prior unlawful conduct of another state. Alright, so that concludes what I'd wanted to cover in the first three, now four, of these recordings, acts giving rise to state responsibility. So in the second group of recordings, we're going to go on to deal with the consequences of state responsibility, and that will fall out in terms of issues of content of state responsibility, who gets to invoke state responsibility, countermeasures as we've just talked about, and also diplomatic protection. And there'll be a separate recording on each one of those.